This is Margaret Lee, Special People and Places. I'm in the Walker County Arts Alliance building. They are housed in the lower level of Jasper Bank, downtown Jasper, Alabama. I have a very special guest, Dr. David J. Rowland. Dr. Rowland has an exhibit on display here, and this is an opportunity for us to see some of his beautiful artwork. David, we were just discussing it. We have talked before, and I know your hometown. You were from Zanesville, Ohio. And refresh me again about the art that was produced in Zanesville, Ohio.
Well, Zanesville was a home of numerous potteries. If you are a viewer of Antique Roadshow, they feature many times Roseville pottery, Weller pottery, Ransbottom pottery, and that Zanesville was the home of those potteries. At one time, Zanesville had over 30 potteries operating, and they had several tile plants. And of course, Zanesville doesn't have them anymore because the pottery industry has moved elsewhere. But it had a long history of beautiful art pottery.
And you said that it was after the war they disappeared. And what happened to them?
Well, most of the pottery went overseas and was produced in Japan and China and in the Southeast Asia, and it just the market disappeared. They apparently could produce it for less cost.
Well, there again, that just goes to show you, doesn't it? What can happen to our industries, and we have to be protective of them. But this was all prior to the war, and you actually worked in one of these pottery places prior to the war.
I worked for Shawnee Pottery, and I was learning to be a time study production person. And my little cubicle was next to the designers and the sculptors in the pottery. And some of them took me under their wing, and they encouraged me to. I've always had a latent interest in art, and I sketched when I was a youngster and did things of that nature, and did some minor carving and sculpture on my own. And they apparently recognized it, so they took me under their wing. I have had no formal art training, but I've had some excellent art exposure.
You certainly did. And one point that you made to me, how important art is for children, you said you didn't have art in school either in Zanesville.
No.
And so it was this early exposure that really sparked your interest.
I was fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time, and they put me over there near the artist, and that's the story.
That's right, and you are so right, David, because people have to realize that just exposing our children how important it is.
It certainly is. It carries over into industry, and in the South, there's been some lack of interest in the graphic arts, but it's all changed because industry's moved here, and there's been a demand for these talents.
Okay. And David, I know you are so proud that Walker County has such an active Arts Alliance group to bring art into the schools for the children.
For a city this size, we really are fortunate. The Arts Alliance has sponsored so many events here, and I really feel that there's recognition of the value of art training for our youngsters.
We do, David. We have just dynamite people here. You know, Mike Putman and Pat Putman that's in charge of this. They're just, and well, there have been many. You know, they change presidents all the time. But these people are just extraordinary, aren't they? And just so passionate about the arts.
They're great, and we owe them a debt of gratitude for their leadership, and we surely do.
We do, and I'm just hoping that more and more of the school groups will bring the children in here, and parents bring the children in here to check the hours, and we'll put those on the screen, of course, and hope they'll come out and see your collection. And we want to take a closer look at it now. Okay, David.
I should preface. I
Yeah.
also have another,
Okay.
bird watcher, and that caused me to have my interest in the birds. So,
Okay.
and
Among your many interests. Oh my gosh. Okay.
my son is a real bird watcher, and he has gone all over the world checking for birds, and he has identified over 700 birds. So he got me interested in it. He's in Peru looking at birds, so he's serious about it.
I guess he is. Okay. So, Dave, I want to go back again. You are such an interesting person to me, always have been, to find out that you actually bought property when you were 17 years old and built your own house.
I was a youngster in Ohio, and I've always been frugal, and I saved my money and bought a lot in a little subdivision, and after 18 months or so, I paid for the lot, paid for it $5 a month or $5 a week whenever I had $5. And when I finished the lot, I started building a house. And it was a little 5-room house, frame house, but it was typical of the subdivision. And I finished the house about the time World War II came along, and I had to go to the Army, so I sold my house. That was my first one. But anyway, I built the house. I go up there every few years to Ohio, and invariably I go by that little house because it has an emotional meaning to me. Yes, have taken my children up there, and I want them to see the house too. Yes. In the north, you had to have a basement because you had furnaces at that time. So we hand dug the basement and had a mule scoop, and we scooped out the dirt, and then we squared it off and made a basement. And the house is functioning. So.
Incredible. And then again, your job at that pottery place now, how old were you at that time?
I went there after I finished high school, and it was a Shawnee pottery, very large pottery, had over 700 employees. And they made a pottery that was found in the dime stores and stores of that nature. It wasn't expensive pottery, but it was quality pottery, and it is a collector item now. People collect that pottery, Shawnee.
Oh my!
Mm-hmm. But of course, it's rare. It's hard to find now.
Well, it was really an exposure to art, wasn't it? And like you said, it really can inspire a young person. But you said, now, the first things that you carved might have been the Indian carvings?
Yes, I carved those 10, 15 years ago, just to experiment with my skills and different things of that nature. And I've done these little whimsical carvings. These are
the Santa Claus with the kettle at Christmas.
And you take a penknife and on a Saturday afternoon, get on the porch, and you can carve those out in a few minutes. And,
well, David Rowland would, but I don't know about other people. But you said your interest. Now, these you have done all in the last 10 years or so?
10 or 15 years. 10 years, I'd say. And I have this number at home, too.
Oh, you have more?
Oh, yes. But it's a long story how I got involved in this. My son is a serious bird watcher.
Which one, David?
Alan. And he has gone, I guess, 4 continents looking for different birds. And he has over 700 birds to his credit, or more than that now. This day he is in Peru right this minute looking for new birds. But anyway, I used to follow my son, and I used to carry the tripod and the binoculars and the books and everything that goes along with a serious bird watcher. And as a result, I became interested too. And as you watch the birds, you get interested in the different characteristics of these birds. Most people differentiate in birds in the color, but their habits and the way they live and their diet makes a difference in the birds.
These are absolutely beautiful, and I had no idea there were hundreds of species of birds. Never stopped to think about it.
Well, each bird has a different characteristic. Now, this little fellow, the nuthatch over here, he invariably you find him going down the tree. You don't see him going up. He'll come down the tree, and of course I've tried to picture him this way. And then when he's searching for insects and things, and when he reaches the bottom of the tree, then he just fly up and start down again. So that's the characteristic.
On the same tree, David, or
yes,
it just goes in a different path?
Mm-hmm. But that's the difference between this bird and another bird. This little fellow right here, he cedar waxwing, and they have most unusual characteristics. They like red berries, and a cedar waxwing will go in a flock, and they'll flock on a holly tree or something with berries, and they'll completely consume all the berries, and as if on a signal, they'll move on to another tree, and they'll go along. They have been known to, there'll be maybe 6 or so on a branch, and one will pass berries down to the one on the end of the branch. So they have that characteristic. Each bird has a different way of operating. The little fellow here, the wren, the little wren is a friend. He'll perch, locate in your mailbox, in your hanging basket, and if you go out in the yard, he'll fuss at you. And they're cute little birds. They're not much bigger than an egg, I guess, and they're sweet little fellows. But that is their characteristic. They will
feed the other birds, sort of?
Around to man, and they'll build close to home.
So you can walk closer to them, and it won't scurry them away. It won't startle them.
This little fella here is different. It's a goldfinch, and goldfinches are, many people that don't know birds will call them canaries or something of this nature, but they have this brilliant yellow plumage, and in season, when in the winter months, it will change, and it'll be a little grayish brown bird, and you'll think of it as a sparrow or something of this nature. But they're so pretty, and they like tiny little seeds.
Well, when do they change colors, David?
They change after mating season. In the late summer, they'll start changing. But if you buy bird seed, now, if you want to bring finch to your home, you have to have a tiny little seed, because their tiny little bill can't handle a large seed.
Okay. Now, the change of the feathers, do they actually lose feathers, or the feathers just change?
They lose feathers and just slowly evolve and change.
Okay.
This fellow here is a catbird, and he's a feisty little bird. Feisty is a word I never heard of until I came to Alabama. But anyway, they're very aggressive, and Really, birds is you have to be close to them to see the difference in color. If you view the catbird from a distance, you think it's just a gray bird, but there's a subtle difference in the colors, and they're very pretty. But they're quite common. And here's another little wren.
This is a wren as well.
Mm-hmm.
And David,
See the difference. This one is older than that one, and this one I've done a better job, I think, in reproducing it.
oh my, I do not understand. How did you do? Now, is that wood out here? The
Wood all the way.
all the way. What about their little legs, David?
I make the legs out of wire
Okay.
and sculpture the feet.
But the nose, the beak.
Oh yeah,
whatever?
it's all wood. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you can get it that precise.
Well,
And whittling.
I do.
And what about the little eyes, David?
Well, I get a glass eye.
Uh-huh.
I buy the glass eyes and I color them to the bird. The birds have different colored eyes. Some have yellow, some have red, some have brown. Most of them are brown. A few of them are black.
I never thought about that either. And then your colors are so beautiful. Just amazing. There again, back to Zanesville, Ohio, right?
Yeah. Here's a noisy little fellow that most people recognize, the blue jay. And blue jay's an aggressive bird. They're fussy and they'll steal eggs from the other birds, and but they're colorful, and most people recognize a blue jay when they see one.
Well, it has to be a blue jay or a cardinal for most people like me to recognize.
And we have one of our common birds is a robin, and American robin, and it is very popular. Some people say, well, spring is here, the robins are here, but the robins are here all the time. They're native to this area, and they stay here. Some birds leave in the winter months, but the robin will stay here, and the jay will stay here. And most of the birds will stay here that I have.
Some of these bigger ones, of course, this big one here, is that a woodpecker?
That's a pileated woodpecker. It's the largest of the woodpeckers, and he's a noisy fellow. If you're out in the woods and you hear it's actually, I think that's where Woody Woodpecker, the cartoon character, got his call. But he's a raucous, has a raucous sound, and they're very colorful. And if you're nearby when he's in a tree, the chips will fall. You're just like a little sawmill out there. Back over here, this is a red-tailed hawk. I've done him half the scale. The bird is twice as large as that. And my daughter fusses at me. She doesn't like, they go after other birds, and that's where it's
Well, that's nature.
nature, the way it is. And apparently on the food chain, he's a little higher than some of the others. But it's a beautiful bird, and he has a red tail, and I'm fond of him. He's one of my fond ones.
I'm like Sue Ellen, though. I don't like to think about him eating the other birds.
Over here, you have the pheasant. And the pheasant you don't find them in Alabama. Sometimes people will introduce them to a hunting preserve, but they don't do well in Alabama, but you find them up in the north and through the Midwest. Actually, the bird has been imported from China and it's flourished here. And of course, it's the hunters like there. People from Alabama will go up to Kansas and Oklahoma and Iowa to hunt pheasants. But that's a half size there too, but they're about the size of a chicken.
Okay. And David, what about this feathers? This is not wood, is it?
It's all wood. All one piece.
David, this absolutely looks like real feathers. I thought maybe on that one you had glued real feathers on.
This little fellow is a song sparrow, and it's just a sweet little bird. I like it, and it's very common around here. When it has its wings down, it's sort of nondescript, but when you raises its wings, and that's why I've pictured it this way, it shows a little marking on its vest.
Mm-hmm. That is
This
pretty.
One of my old ones here. That's a Canada goose. Of course, they're a large bird. I whittled that out on one of my front porch excursions.
Do those migrate?
Oh yes.
Here?
Some of them winters here.
Oh, okay.
And I've been up in the Birmingham area. I've seen them out on the interstate. They'll flock down in the medium and interstate, but usually around a large body of water you find. And they're beautiful birds. They can be a pest at times when you get too many of them, but they're beautiful birds. They mate for life.
Oh, my. David, as a youngster, did you ever whittle? Did you ever do anything, any carving at all with a knife?
Mostly sketching and things of that nature.
Okay. But, I wonder, you almost hesitate as a mother thinking about how old would my son have to be before I would allow him to have a knife?
Oh, no, we didn't worry about that.
I know.
It's a red-winged blackbird, and you find them in swampy areas. And again, I've tried to depict the environment of the bird and see the cattails and all that.
Yes.
And it's the food, insects and things.
Okay.
And they come in flocks, and occasionally you'll see them in a flock of blackbirds or starlings that come into your yard. You'll find a few of them sometimes. But it's
somehow you just don't worry about birds eating insects and things. But when it comes to other birds, I agree with Sue Ellen.
the birds do us a tremendous service in consuming insects, mosquitoes, starlings, even the pest birds. But they serve us in some way.
Now that hawk, is that also called a vulture?
Oh no. That's a different type of bird.
Okay.
Now vultures, turkey vultures, and we have them around here. They eat carrion and roadside kills and things like that.
Yes, you see them.
I don't think I'm going to carve any. They're not very pretty.
Okay, David, let's see the rest of your collection over on this side. Oh, what have we here?
Oh, it's another Canada goose. That was one of my early ones, too. You can tell the difference. This fellow here is most unusual. That's the belted kingfisher. And if you have a farm pond or live along a river or on a fishing expedition, you'll see this fellow. And he'll swoop down onto the water surface and pick up a little fingerling, a minnow, or some sort. It has an unusual habitat. They dig a nest in the bank of a creek. If there's a clay bank, they'll uncover a tunnel, possibly 4 or 5 feet, and they lay their eggs back in the end of that tunnel.
So they're actually in like a burrow or something. They burrow.
Burrow is the proper word, I guess. And they're beautiful birds, and when they have a screech similar to a squeaking door, and when they come down on the water, you can hear them. Here's another little fella, a Baltimore oriole. And I've tried to depict, you can see I've cut an orange slice here. The Baltimore oriole enjoys fruits of all sorts. And if you have some spoiled fruit, if you want to attract birds to your variety of birds, if you orange peels, apple peels, grapes, anything of that sort, that Baltimore Oriole appreciates it.
Are those found in Walker County?
Yes, they come. You have to encourage them to come, but yes, they're not common. But every season you'll see a few. This fella is, I guess, probably, if you polled the public, is probably the favorite bird,
The hummingbird.
And of course, you have about 5 varieties of hummingbirds in the United States, but the ruby throat is the one. See the little red throat?
Oh, yeah.
You find in Alabama, and they're again, I'll use the word feisty. They're feisty little fellows. They'll challenge each other.
I don't think I've ever seen any blue on them before, but they.
It's an iridescent blue, and when you examine them, they're very pretty little birds. Green, growing into iridescent blue, and they have the ruby throat. And if hummingbird feeders, you can buy a feeder, you can make a feeder, but they like sugar water, which they like nectar really, but sugar water is similar. And here's a sweet little bird. That's tag. It's not. You can hear them in the early morning when you still dusky dark. That's another term, dusky dark, that I learned in Alabama. That you hear them out there, and it's a spooky sound. It really, if you're a 11-year-old Boy Scout on your first camping trip and you hear that during the night, you'll wonder about it, worry about it, frighten you. But they're pretty little birds, and they stay in mostly during the night, out during the night, and then they get in a cave, or not a cave, a hollow tree or some sort during the daylight hours. Let's see what else. Oh, this fellow is a bobwhite. The reason that you still find them in the Midwest and Midwest and the West, but they feed on grains, and as our farmers cease to plant corn and they do away with fences where they seek refuge in the fence rows, they just slowly left away. I don't think they've been depleted because of man killing them or anything of that nature.